Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Y&R spoilers explode with shockwaves across Genoa City as a horrifying truth comes to light that threatens to destroy the Newman legacy from the inside out, beginning with the night Nikki Newman climbed behind the wheel drunk. A moment that at first appeared to be a tragic lapse in judgment but now looks far more sinister as whispers turn into accusations that Victor Newman himself may have orchestrated the entire disaster, using his wife's fragile emotional state as a pawn in a far-reaching chess game designed to manipulate outcomes he believed were slipping beyond his control, because on that night Nikki wasn't just intoxicated by alcohol, she was intoxicated by grief, fear, and a sense of helplessness that had been quietly cultivated over weeks by Victor's calculated emotional pressure, subtle gaslighting, and relentless insistence that she was losing relevance both in her family and in Newman Enterprises, pushing her closer and closer to the edge until one reckless decision changed everything. The accident itself sent shockwaves through Genoa City as sirens pierced the silence and Nikki was pulled from the car disoriented, injured, and humiliated, her blood alcohol level confirming the unthinkable and instantly transforming her from beloved matriarch into tabloid scandal, while Victor arrived at the hospital wearing the mask of the devoted husband, raging at the police, demanding silence, and pulling strings behind the scenes to control the narrative. But even in those first chaotic hours there were cracks in his story as witnesses recalled seeing Victor and Nikki arguing viciously earlier that evening, with Victor reportedly shoving a glass of liquor into her hand and coldly telling her she needed to remember who she was. Words that now haunt everyone who hears them. As the investigation unfolds, Chance Chancellor quietly reopens the case when evidence surfaces that Nikki had attempted to call Victor multiple times just before the crash, calls that went unanswered, while Victor's phone records show he was in contact with a private investigator and a fixer at the exact same time, suggesting he knew something catastrophic was about to happen and chose to let it unfold, or worse, engineered it as a distraction from a far more dangerous corporate and legal threat looming over him. Meanwhile, Nikki awakens in rehab racked with guilt and shame, her memories fragmented but slowly sharpening into clarity as therapy sessions unlock suppressed recollections of Victor encouraging her to drink, dismissing her concerns, and subtly framing the night's drive as a test of loyalty, a way to prove she was still strong enough to stand beside him, leading Nikki to the devastating realization that her own husband may have weaponized her addiction, a revelation that leaves her shattered and questioning every moment of their decades-long marriage. As Nikki begins to speak out, Victor's empire starts to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence, with Jack Abbott seizing the opportunity to push for a full criminal investigation, Phyllis Summers leaking strategically damaging information to the press, and Victoria Newman growing increasingly disturbed as she uncovers internal Newman Enterprises communications suggesting her father authorized financial transfers and legal maneuvers timed precisely to coincide with Nikki's arrest, raising the chilling possibility that Victor needed Nikki disgraced, distracted, and legally compromised to protect himself from exposure in an even darker scheme. Tensions explode when Nikki, trembling but resolute, confronts Victor face to face and demands the truth, accusing him of knowing she was drunk and still allowing her to drive, accusing him of pushing her toward the bottle when she was most vulnerable, and accusing him of loving control more than he ever loved her, a confrontation that leaves Victor momentarily speechless before he lashes out, denying everything while simultaneously admitting he knew she'd be fine. Words that send a ripple of horror through everyone present and ultimately become the turning point that leads Chance to place Victor under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy, coercion, and obstruction of justice. The image of Victor Newman being led away in handcuffs sends Genoa City into chaos, with supporters insisting he's being framed while enemies celebrate the fall of a titan. But the most devastating fallout belongs to Nikki, who must now live with the dual burden of her actions and the possibility that the man she trusted above all others deliberately set her up to fail, leaving her to fight addiction, public disgrace, and heartbreak all at once. As court dates loom and alliances shift, the question that hangs over every conversation is not just whether Victor masterminded Nikki's drunk driving scandal, but whether this is finally the moment when his obsession with power destroys the very family he claimed to protect, setting the stage for a reckoning that could permanently alter the Newman dynasty and redefine who truly holds the moral high ground in Genoa City, because in the end the most terrifying truth may not be that Nikki drove drunk, but that she may never have been behind the wheel of her own life at all. Wire spoilers deepen the chaos in Genoa City as the fallout from Nikki Newman's drunk driving scandal grows darker, more complex, and far more dangerous than anyone initially imagined, because Victor Newman's arrest is only the beginning of a sprawling psychological and legal war that threatens to expose decades of manipulation, emotional control, and ruthless power plays hidden beneath the polished surface of the Newman marriage. And as Victor sits in an interrogation room refusing legal counsel, with the same icy confidence that once ruled boardrooms, Nikki finds herself unraveling painful memories that no longer feel isolated or accidental but instead form a horrifying pattern stretching back years, moments when Victor subtly undermined her sobriety by isolating her from support, belittling her strength, and framing relapse as weakness rather than illness. And as therapists encourage Nikki to confront the truth, she begins to remember past incidents she once dismissed as stress or coincidence, like the business dinners where Victor insisted on ordering wine for her despite knowing her struggles, the quiet nights when he provoked arguments then disappeared, leaving temptation within reach, and the countless times he framed her addiction as something he managed rather than something she fought, a dynamic that now feels disturbingly deliberate. Meanwhile, Chance Chancellor assembles a task force to re-examine every legal and financial move Victor made in the months leading up to the accident, uncovering shell corporations, hush money payments, and burner phones used to coordinate damage control long before Nikki's car ever veered off the road, suggesting Victor anticipated the fallout and positioned himself to exploit it, a revelation that shakes even seasoned investigators who once believed Victor merely reacted to crises rather than manufacturing them. As the press descends on Genoa City, headlines explode with speculation that Nikki was used as a human shield to divert attention from a federal investigation into corporate espionage tied to Newman Enterprises, and as journalists dig deeper, leaked emails surface hinting that Victor needed a personal catastrophe to derail regulators and buy time, words that send chills through Nikki when she reads them because the timing aligns too perfectly with her relapse and arrest, forcing her to confront the possibility that the worst night of her life was never truly hers at all. At the same time, the Newman children are torn apart by conflicting loyalties as Victoria struggles to reconcile her respect for her father's brilliance with the mounting evidence of his cruelty. Nick spirals into rage and guilt for not protecting his mother sooner, and Adam, ever the outsider, quietly pieces together fragments of the truth with unsettling clarity, recognizing Victor's tactics because he's been their victim before. And when Adam confronts Victor in jail, accusing him of sacrificing Nikki the same way he once sacrificed him, Victor's silence speaks louder than denial, confirming Adam's worst fears and solidifying his decision to turn against his father once and for all. As Nikki prepares to testify, her resolve wavers under the weight of public judgment and private shame, yet she finds unexpected strength in the support of those she once pushed away, including Jack Abbott, who offers compassion without conditions, reminding her that accountability does not require self-destruction, and Sharon Rosales, who shares her own battles with addiction, helping Nikki see that relapse does not define her, manipulation does. And with each conversation, Nikki's voice grows steadier as she realizes her testimony isn't just about Victor's crimes but about reclaiming her autonomy after years of emotional captivity. Inside the courtroom, tension becomes suffocating as prosecutors lay out a chilling narrative of coercion, presenting expert testimony on psychological abuse and control dynamics, arguing that Victor systematically destabilized Nikki to ensure compliance. And when surveillance footage is played showing Victor calmly leaving Nikki alone with alcohol on the night of the crash, jurors visibly recoil, yet Victor remains unmoved, confident that his legacy and legal team will shield him as they always have, until Nikki takes the stand and delivers a devastating account of her marriage, speaking not as a victim seeking pity, but as a woman finally seeing her life clearly, describing how love became leverage, protection became possession, and loyalty became a weapon used against her weakest moments. As Nikki's words echo through the courtroom, Victor's composure fractures for the first time when she recounts the moment before she got into the car, when she begged him not to leave her alone and he responded with cold indifference, a memory that reframes the accident not as reckless abandon but as abandonment itself. And as tears stream down Nikki's face, the courtroom falls silent, marking a turning point not only in the trial but in the moral reckoning of Genoa City, where longtime defenders of Victor begin to question the cost of his empire. Outside the courthouse, Newman Enterprises spirals into crisis as stock prices plummet, board members defect, and long-buried secrets surface, including evidence that Victor orchestrated multiple scandals over the years by exploiting family vulnerabilities, confirming that Nikki's tragedy was not an anomaly but part of a pattern. And as Victoria steps into an interim leadership role, she vows to dismantle the culture of fear her father created, even as she wrestles with grief for the man she thought he was. As the trial reaches its climax, prosecutors push for maximum charges, citing Victor's lack of remorse and history of obstruction, while defense attorneys attempt to paint Nikki as solely responsible, a strategy that backfires spectacularly when Nikki, during cross-examination, calmly accepts responsibility for driving drunk while refusing to accept blame for being manipulated, a distinction that resonates deeply with jurors and the public alike, shifting the narrative from scandal to systemic abuse. When the verdict finally arrives, Genoa City holds its breath as Victor Newman is found guilty of conspiracy and coercion, a verdict that sends shockwaves through the soap's universe and marks the first time Victor truly loses control. And as he is sentenced, his gaze locks onto Nikki not with hatred, but with something resembling disbelief, as if he never imagined a world where she would choose truth over him. In the aftermath, Nikki begins a long road toward healing, returning to rehab not as punishment but as empowerment, determined to rebuild her life free from Victor's shadow, while Victor faces isolation behind bars, forced to confront a legacy no longer defined by power but by the damage he inflicted. And as Genoa City slowly adjusts to a new reality, the story leaves viewers with haunting questions about love, control, and accountability, reminding everyone that sometimes the most dangerous betrayals aren't committed by enemies, but by those who claim to protect us, and that true redemption begins not with denial, but with the courage to face the truth, no matter how devastating it may be. As Genoa City reels from the shocking conviction of Victor Newman, the aftermath of Nikki's drunk driving scandal takes on new dimensions of emotional, legal, and corporate chaos that seem to stretch endlessly, because while Victor sits behind bars, his iron grip on Newman Enterprises and the city's social hierarchy finally loosened, the Newmans find themselves confronting a truth that has long been ignored, that the man who once seemed untouchable has left a trail of fear, manipulation, and pain that must now be reckoned with. And Nikki, still fragile from both her public humiliation and private betrayals, discovers that recovery is not linear but a labyrinth of psychological and practical challenges, where every phone call, every meeting, and every glance from the public can trigger memories of the night she drove drunk, a night now scrutinized not just by law enforcement but by the press, social media, and even her own children, all of whom struggle with loyalty, grief, and anger. Victoria, balancing her role as interim CEO with her personal anguish over her father's actions, must navigate hostile board members who see an opportunity to capitalize on Newman Enterprises' instability, while simultaneously defending her mother's reputation, a task complicated by leaked internal emails and recorded conversations that reveal just how deeply Victor involved himself in Nikki's spiral, and how much her suffering was entangled with his unyielding pursuit of control, an idea that shocks investors, employees, and Genoa City residents alike, who had long assumed the Newman dynasty was synonymous with invincibility. Nick, meanwhile, wrestles with guilt and rage, oscillating between a desire to protect his mother and a burning need to punish the father who weaponized family bonds for personal gain, while secretly grappling with questions about his own complicity in past manipulations, wondering if his inaction contributed to the dangerous environment that drove Nikki to that car. And as he digs through legal documents, surveillance footage, and Victor's personal correspondence, Nick uncovers a web of premeditated actions, from discreet meetings with dubious associates to financial arrangements designed to shield Victor from liability, all of which point to a level of calculation that borders on criminal genius. Adam, always the observant outsider within the family, sees the opportunity for leverage, but also the human cost, recognizing that while Victor's legal defeat is a momentary victory, the emotional devastation left in his wake may have lifelong consequences for Nikki, Victoria, and the extended Newman network. And when he cautiously approaches Nikki with pieces of evidence that could further incriminate Victor, she experiences a mixture of relief and horror, realizing that confronting the truth is both liberating and terrifying, because the more she knows, the more impossible it becomes to maintain illusions about the marriage, the family, or the man she once believed to be invincible. Meanwhile, outside the legal sphere, Genoa City's social scene erupts with gossip, speculation, and opportunism, as former allies of Victor rebrand themselves as defenders of morality, former enemies seek to consolidate power, and media outlets sensationalize every detail of Nikki's struggle and Victor's conviction, turning personal trauma into public spectacle, while Nikki herself is forced to navigate the treacherous landscape of public sympathy and scorn, attending rehab sessions, therapy appointments, and support group meetings under the glare of cameras, the weight of public expectation pressing on her like a physical force. Yet with each session, each conversation, she begins to reclaim fragments of herself long suppressed by addiction and years of emotional manipulation. As Nikki slowly emerges from the haze of rehab and legal proceedings, she confronts the reality of rebuilding a life intertwined with a family legacy tainted by betrayal, a task made even more daunting by Victor's looming presence, even behind bars, because he continues to exert influence through loyal operatives within Newman Enterprises, manipulating meetings, stock decisions, and strategic communications, a stark reminder that incarceration cannot entirely remove the shadow of his power. And as Nikki grapples with this duality, freedom yet vulnerability, she is confronted by an unexpected ally in Sharon Rosales, who provides guidance, compassion, and strategic insight, helping Nikki craft both a personal and public narrative that emphasizes accountability, resilience, and redemption, even as whispers of Victor's next moves circulate through the city like a storm cloud on the horizon. Within the courtroom, the reverberations of Victor's conviction continue to affect legal and financial proceedings, as attorneys representing victims, competitors, and even shareholders scrutinize every corporate maneuver, uncovering further evidence of coercion, fraud, and abuse of power, leading to multiple civil suits and regulatory investigations. And as the legal web expands, Nikki's testimony becomes central not only to Victor's criminal culpability but also to the restructuring of Newman Enterprises, forcing the family to confront uncomfortable questions about inheritance, leadership, and ethical stewardship, as well as the long-term consequences of unchecked ambition. In parallel, the Newman children struggle with personal relationships tested by loyalty, betrayal, and moral compromise, as Victoria grapples with her love life while managing a company in turmoil. Nick faces personal and professional crossroads that challenge his identity, and Adam maneuvers strategically to protect his own interests while dealing with the fallout of decades of family dysfunction. All while Nikki navigates a complex path of healing that requires confronting not just Victor's manipulation but her own decisions, understanding that while she bears responsibility for driving drunk, she did not choose to be a pawn in a game designed to destabilize her, and that acknowledging this distinction is key to reclaiming agency over her life. Amidst these tangled threads, Victor's supporters rally, insisting that his conviction is unjust and that Nikki's testimony is exaggerated or manipulated, creating a polarized city where friends and foes are indistinguishable, and where alliances shift daily based on perception, gossip, and emerging evidence, leaving Nikki, her children, and allies like Jack Abbott in a precarious position as they attempt to navigate both public scrutiny and internal family dynamics, knowing that a single misstep could undo progress and give Victor an opportunity to regain leverage from behind bars. Nikki's journey toward empowerment is punctuated by moments of vulnerability and revelation, such as late-night reflections on past traumas, the confrontation with old friends who question her choices, and therapy sessions where buried memories surface, including instances when Victor's influence subtly dictated her behavior, shaped her fears, and manipulated her desires, revealing a pattern of coercion that extends beyond the night of the accident and highlights the insidious nature of psychological abuse. And through these realizations, Nikki begins to cultivate a renewed sense of self, one that prioritizes health, honesty, and emotional autonomy, even as Victor's legal battles and residual influence continue to loom large over her life and those of her children. As Genoa City watches, Nikki becomes a symbol of resilience, demonstrating that recovery is not linear but multifaceted, encompassing sobriety, public accountability, and the reclaiming of personal dignity, all while contending with a father figure turned antagonist whose presence, whether in the courtroom, corporate boardroom, or through media channels, serves as a constant reminder of the complex interplay between love, control, and betrayal, making every decision, every alliance, and every action a calculated step in the ongoing struggle to rebuild a life long overshadowed by the consequences of one fateful night. And as the city braces for further fallout, including pending appeals, corporate restructuring, media exposés, and personal reckonings, the story emphasizes the multifaceted nature of trauma, power, and redemption, illustrating that while one night of reckless driving may catalyze public scrutiny, it is the cumulative weight of decades of manipulation, abuse, and psychological coercion that truly defines the scope of devastation, and Nikki's gradual reclamation of her voice, autonomy, and influence serves as both a dramatic testament to human resilience and a cautionary tale about the cost of unchecked ambition, the fragility of trust, and the necessity of confronting uncomfortable truths, a narrative that will continue to reverberate throughout Genoa City for years, influencing alliances, shaping legacies, and redefining the dynamics of a family long considered untouchable, while reminding viewers that sometimes the battle is not merely against others, but against the shadows of influence that have shaped one's own choices, perceptions, and sense of self, and that true empowerment begins not with victory over an adversary, but with the courage to see clearly, speak truth, and reclaim control over one's own life, even when every force that once held sway seems determined to maintain its grip, making Nikki's journey both painfully relatable and compellingly heroic in a city where drama, scandal, and betrayal are as certain as the next sunrise.